I've always considered myself a responsible person, especially when it comes to my pets. As a single man without a family, my two cats were like my children. I made sure they had everything they needed, from entertaining toys to the comfiest beds. I even bought the most expensive food, the stuff that vets would recommend even though I don't make that much money. But like I said, I'm a responsible pet owner, and I would do anything to ensure the creatures in my care have the very best I can provide. My life with my pets was pretty normal until very recently, the one night that everything changed. It was late in the evening and I heard a loud crash outside my window, followed by the sound of trash cans tumbling over. Worried that my cats might have snuck outside, I went to investigate. I opened the door carefully and squeezed my body outside, closing the door behind me, making sure not to let my cats escape. I expected to see nothing out of the ordinary, but what I saw outside was pure chaos. The trash cans had been toppled over and the bags of garbage had been torn apart. It looked like those damn raccoons had made a mess again. This happens a lot, but this time, something was different. Is that blood? It definitely looked like raccoon fur and blood everywhere. Did something just eat the raccoons that were trying to eat my garbage? A slight panic started to seep into my body, and I began to think of all my neighbors who have been complaining about their pets going missing in ever-increasing numbers. Could there be wild dogs or coyotes in the neighborhood? Could something be eating the pets in our town? Could they be the same creatures that are responsible for the raccoon carnage in my driveway? I didn't really want to find out, so I turned to go back inside, and my panic turned into pure terror as I realized my door was wide open. I know I shut it behind me. I'm always careful. My heart racing, I ran back inside as fast as my legs would let me to look for my cats. My heart was sinking lower and lower as I failed to find them. I checked all their favorite spots. I even went into the kitchen and shook their treat bag, a move that never failed to bring them out from hiding. But this time, nothing. Please don't tell me they escaped. I started to walk toward my door to check outside when I heard a loud bang in the basement, followed by noises unlike anything I've ever heard. The only way to explain it is like children laughing. I followed the noises, not sure if they would lead me to my beloved pets or to the raccoon killers. I rounded the corner in my basement and realized quickly that it wasn't my pets. What I found was something I could never have expected, and it's even harder to describe. For lack of a better term, they looked like elves. They were miniature humans, but their faces were twisted with anger and malice. They had slimy, grizzled skin with sparse green hairs, and those teeth could definitely tear apart a raccoon with no problem. Now, I'm no hero, but I realized how dangerous these things were, so I initially tried to capture them, but they were too fast and too nimble. They moved with an unnatural grace, as if they had no bones in their bodies. They laughed and cackled as they scampered around the basement, knocking over my boxes and tools. The more I watched them, the more I realized that they were not harmless creatures despite their childlike giggling. They were dangerous, and they had no qualms about harming me or the local pets or anyone else who stood in their way. This realization hit especially close to home when I noticed tufts of hair strewn about my basement. And please, God, don't tell me that's a piece of a cat collar in that creature's mouth. I thought about giving up and letting them take me too, over some dumb cats. But they were my babies. It took only one lunge towards me from one of the elves to completely snap me out of my sorrow and into fight or flight mode. My basement is old and dark and deep and has no windows or doors. There's only one way out, so I knew I could trap these creatures down here. But what then? What would my next move be? I thought it was at least better than my current situation, so I ran up the steps, squeezed out the basement door, frantically blocking it behind me with everything and anything I could find. And for now, it seemed to work. The murdering elves were trapped. They must have been full of raccoons and cats that first night, which made them a bit more docile than normal, because I noticed that as their meals wore off and their hunger grew, they would become louder and more frantic. They would begin clawing at the basement walls and occasionally the door itself. I knew that door wouldn't hold at this rate, and they would be released to wreak havoc on more innocent creatures. So I did what I thought I had to do. I set mousetraps around my house and tossed the poor captured rodents into the basement, and for another day, the elves would go silent and still. At first I was horrified at the thought of feeding innocent animals to these creatures. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized that I had no other choice. These elves were too dangerous to release into the wild, and I couldn't risk letting them loose in my own home. You're going to hate me for this, but after only a short time, catching rodents in my yard became harder and less frequent and was no longer working. So I began to make regular trips to the pet store, buying up small animals to keep the elves fed and docile. It was a difficult and dangerous life, always looking over my shoulder and praying that I wouldn't be caught. But as time went on, the situation grew more and more dire. The pet store started to get suspicious, and I knew I had to rotate between different stores to avoid drawing too much attention to myself. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The elves had turned my life into a living nightmare, and I was constantly on edge, afraid that they would escape and cause havoc in the world. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to kill them. They were too intelligent, too cunning, too human. And they were just doing what they needed to do to survive, like any other creature. Sometimes as I looked at their twisted, malicious faces, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of twisted karma had brought them into my life. I was trapped in a never-ending cycle of fear and desperation. Every day I woke up wondering if this would be the day that the elves would escape and wreak havoc on my life. Every night I went to bed with the sound of their eerie laughter ringing in my ears. I knew that what I was doing was wrong. I was harboring and feeding creatures that were capable of great harm, but I couldn't let them go. Not when I knew the damage they could cause. I'm too responsible for that. I've always considered myself a responsible person.